Okay, so Year 10, I just wanted to talk you through a bit of a creative writing building exercise just to give you a bit more information on practice on how to do this for your assessment task. So I've just provided another picture to have a look at. This one's more of a courtroom, and we have people sitting in the chairs waiting for something to begin, and some of the detectives and police officers and lawyers walking around. Okay, so what I like to start with, and you might want to have a practice of this as we go along as well. So whose point of view am I going to begin with? All right, so I could be either one of the policemen standing here. I could be one of the young ladies or young men sitting in the aisles waiting for the trial to begin. I could be the lawyer, or I could be a clerk over here. Okay, any of those will do. I think I'm going to stick with, let's go with one of these young ladies over here. Okay, that's going to be my choice. You could choose whatever you like. Okay, so my point of view is going to be a young woman, and I'm going to go from third person. Okay, I prefer to write in third person. You certainly do not have to do that. Okay, so the next thing I like to start with is, what do you see? What does she see in this courtroom? All right, so I'm going to focus on, let's go a bit of a key over here. So for C, will be in the blue. So I'm going to talk about the light streaming in. I'm going to talk about, I'm looking at the police. I'm going to talk about one more thing, maybe the people around her peers. Okay, then the next thing is smells. What sort of smells might she be having? What would a courtroom smell like? Okay, so I'd be thinking of, okay, maybe the chairs are made of leather. The smell of leather. You could be a bit creative. Maybe this guy is carrying a coffee cup and you can smell the coffee. Taste. Taste is a tricky one. What on earth could you possibly taste in a courtroom? Excuse me. So maybe she's chewing some gum. Okay, you don't have to do too many tastes because that can be tricky. Sometimes in a crime scene, you could, especially if you are part of the action, maybe you could taste the blood or the alcohol or the coffee yourself. And touch. Let's go back to, we'll highlight this one in a minute. Let's go to this one. What is she touching? So we've got maybe her, that's a terrible color. Let's just go back to our pen. She could be touching her handbag, the cold chair, etc. Okay, a bit of brainstorming of all the senses. Oh, and finally the sounds. Touch. What can she hear? Courtrooms would have a very distinct noise. And let's just clear some of this space. So maybe she is hearing chatter of all the people around her, murmuring of the cops. All right. So the next thing you could do with that, is there anything on that page that you could transform into a figurative language device? So, for example, the coffee, maybe instead of just smelling coffee, the coffee smelt like heaven. Okay, you've got a simile. The leather, reminded her of her grandfather's home. Okay, you could say that's symbolism, symbolism of comfort. What about the chatter or the murmuring? The chatter was a, let's think. I'm thinking of maybe like a jungle, but not a very good, really similar metaphor for a courtroom. The chatter was a reminder of her fear. Okay, so maybe that metaphor of that fear of being in that room, giving the reader impression that maybe she is waiting for this trial because whoever is on trial is important to her. So that is a real example of show, don't tell. Remember, so all these strategies, the senses, the metaphors, the similes, personification, these are the showing the reader without explicitly telling them what is going on. Okay, so we've started with point of view. Whose point of view is it? Then we looked at the senses. Let's just list what those senses are. And then we change them to some figurative language. You don't have to do every one of them because that can be a little bit of overkill. But certainly if you can swap out a couple of them, that actually really lifts your writing. Remember, those figurative language devices will often link to the senses. So the hearing ones, what you can hear, will be often onomatopoeia, because you could use buzz or the crash or the creak of the leather chair. All right, next step is some adjectives. So the adjectives obviously are just a link to the nouns. So the chair or the stand or the floorboards, okay? These ones, you want to add a word in front of that to describe it, because this will provide an emotional response. For example, she could be looking at the person on trial. Let me just clear some room here. You can always come back and have a look. Oh, let's just use the highlighter, hey? So you can always come back to this video and have a look at what I've done, the annotations there. But think about it this way. If she is looking at whoever is on trial, we are describing this character with show, don't tell. So the adjectives will remind us what she is all about. So she is, instead of saying she is looking at the criminal, which is the noun, she is looking at the hardened criminal. Okay, hardened gives us that idea that this may not be a first offense. This could be a career criminal. This is not somebody innocent. All right. Whereas if you replace that with something like vulnerable, that changes the character here entirely. All right. She could be thinking about a scene that she had seen. She had witnessed. Maybe that's why she's there. Maybe she is a witness. So she's thinking about the murder. Now, that's the noun. Whatever you put in front of it is going to be quite significant. So is it a brutal murder? Is it a grisly murder? Is it gruesome? Okay, so those words really highlight the extent of that crime. She could be looking over at these guys, okay? The cop, that's the noun. Is he diligent? Giving this idea that he is really hardworking. Or is he lazy? Okay, giving the idea that maybe these guys aren't very good at their job. All right, those are quite significant little tricks to write about, and when you're planning your creative writing responses. So it's a bit of self-editing here, I guess you could say. And lastly, I want you to think about overall, when you go back and read it, how can I lift that vocab? Okay, what are some of the words that I can replace? Remember, don't use such words such as, oh, she was scared. Okay, terrified. She felt a sense of, she felt happy when she saw him on the stand. No, let's change it to elated. Maybe she really missed him, etc. All right, so really quick little tutorial on how to self-edit some of these works that you've been asked to do. So just to remind you, a bit of a checklist. All right, number 1, who's the point of view? And it has to be linked to the character that you want to represent. 2, use your 5 senses. List them. What are the things you can see, hear, smell, touch, taste? Okay, then can you replace some of those with some figurative language? Not all of them, just some of them. And remember, they are linked. So your sounds could quite often be onomatopoeia. Etc. Whereas your similes and your metaphors and your personification can be much more linked to the other senses. Number 4. Think about the adjectives that you are using. Okay, what's in front of those nouns? Do they actually enhance the story? Do they make a point? And lastly, look at your vocab. Okay, lift it. They're trying to create emotion. So show emotion with your words. Okay, so little bit of a mini workshop on how to self-edit your work. And you can certainly do this for the ones that you've done so far and the ones that are going to be presented to you for your assessment. Even if it's not a focus of point of view or if it's not a focus of show, don't tell, these are still things that will enhance your writing whenever you do them. So I hope that helps. Go to it, troops. I'm sure you will have fun creating more of your crime fiction short narrative.